We talk about Donald Trump
Let's
again.
talk about the
Aubrey
Donald, because it
Allegretti
got
is with
quite
us from the Times.
excitable in the last hour. And I thought, apart from waking up tomorrow, partially sighted and deaf, let's give that one a go again, because I think Aubrey's going to be a quieter offering in this debate.
It's always the still small voice of calm. So it's an easy one for you. Do you think Trump will win the election?
I mean, nobody sort of expected him to in 2016, and if this is a rerun of 2020, then people will ask, how much better has Joe Biden been? And obviously, economic growth in America has been much more successful than it has been in the UK. Joe Biden has done a much better job at sort of reducing inflation and keeping it much tamer than we've seen in other countries across the world. But the question is really, do people sort of feel that in their pockets enough to ultimately sort of stick with him? And that's got to be a big motivating, mobilising factor. They might just sort of stay at home or end up going for Trump and saying, well, we'll just sort of, take turns switching between the two parties.
What I want to ask you, as a journalist covering politics, is, I've been not shocked or surprised, frankly, but, yet again quite disappointed that when you watch Trump's speech and he uses the word bloodbath, to me it's very clear he's talking about an economic bloodbath. And it's a strident term, yes, but it's not incitement to violence. I can tell that. I'm no idiot. I think most people aren't idiots. Similarly, I think he sort of made a mention of a crime that was committed by an illegal migrant to the country and called him an animal or something to that end, of which now, that means he's clearly labelling all people who cross the border animals. And it just, every single media outlet seems to have doubled down on the use of language rather than talking about the interesting facts of the story. I wanted to know your reaction to that, and if you think it's just sort of getting overbaked nonsense, this sort of deliberately decontextualising and becoming overly sensitised to the use of particular words.
Well, Donald Trump is somebody who is fairly sort of carefree with his language. So I think to a certain extent people will sort of take this with a pinch of salt. But I suppose there is the undercurrent to this, which is the extent to which there is a concern that if he doesn't win the election in 2024, as he didn't in 2020, what that means. And we saw a fairly violent uprising on January the 6th at the Capitol building. And I suppose there's a concern that this is a sort of call to arms, indicating that the same thing or worse could or should happen again. Now, Donald Trump makes clear that he was talking about an economic bloodbath relating to effectively the automotive industry. He was saying, I think there should be 100% tariffs on cars that are being imported to the US. So he was saying, if you vote for me, great news. If not, then the automotive sector will be decimated and there'll be this economic bloodbath. But do we really not expect our politicians to understand the impact of their words, particularly in the context of January 6th?
Do we not expect our journalists to also understand the impact of words and actually talk about the story and talk about whether this is a good policy, instead of every single broadcaster, other than us, of course, going up in arms and screeching about, oh, he said bloodbath, he's a threat to stability. I mean, actually, to me, it's the irresponsibility of journalists who turn this into the big stirring pot.
What is this about? This is not, maybe not even the beginning. Certainly, the start, shall we say, of the Democrats' campaign, and that campaign. Biden's campaign will be, my opponent is a lunatic. My opponent did January the 6th. Watch out, he'll do it again. Look, he's talking about bloodbaths, as you quite rightly say.
Trump's
it was
campaign,
quite clear.
He died in 2002.
But certainly Trump should be careful about using words like bloodbath, because Biden will jump on that. That's what we're talking about. This is going to be the Democrats' campaign. Do you want us, the Democrats who've restored some kind of economic prosperity to America, or do you want that lunatic? That will be their campaign, right?
Yeah, I suspect that Joe Biden will effectively sort of present Donald Trump as somebody who's deranged, potentially sort of untrustworthy. Obviously, he did do the job as US president for 4 years, but Joe Biden really set out on a mission to make politics boring again, and people will decide whether or not that's something that they ultimately prefer or not.
He hasn't been boring. He's been very entertaining.
I think
he's been unusual, I think, as a president, to say the least.
You can say that again. Now,